I kissed a Mafia boss at my cousin's wedding, and that one reckless moment changed everything. He told me I had no idea what I just started. He was right. Within hours, I witnessed something I was never supposed to see. A man on his knees, a gun to his head, and those cold, dark eyes finding mine in the shadows. If you ever tell anyone about this, I will know. His voice was silk wrapped around a knife. I should have run. I should have disappeared. Instead, I fell in love with the most dangerous man I'd ever met. This is a story about choices, about a woman who discovered that love doesn't always come in safe packages, and sometimes, the most beautiful things are born from darkness. If you've ever felt trapped between what's safe and what makes you feel alive, stay until the end. This story is for you. If stories like this speak to your soul, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Drop a comment telling me, would you stay or would you run? I never knew a single night could divide a life in two. But this wedding was that night. The estate was a fantasy of rolling green hills and huge white tents. They glowed like paper lanterns in the fading light. Towers of champagne glasses sparkled as the sun went down. My cousin Sophia married a man with so much money it was like an invisible shield. I was happy for her, but I did not belong. I stayed near the edge of the party, wearing a pale pink dress that felt too fragile for my own skin. The laughter around me was easy. It came from people who never had to worry about making rent. I sipped champagne I did not want and tried to pretend I was one of them. That was when I first saw him. He was standing on a stone terrace surrounded by men in dark, expensive suits. He was not the loudest man there, because he did not have to be. Everyone else seemed to move around him, drawn in by a silent force. He had dark hair, slicked back from his forehead. His jaw was sharp and his eyes were cold. From across the lawn, I could feel the weight of his stare. He turned his head, and for a second, those eyes found me. I could not breathe. Someone bumped my shoulder and I looked away. My heart was pounding, but I did not know why. A voice next to me made me jump. Stay away from him. It was my friend Clara. Her face was tense. Who? I asked, but I knew the answer. Dante Moretti, she said. The name sounded like poison. He is dangerous, Elena. Truly dangerous. Not a bad boy from a movie. He is the kind of man who makes people vanish. I gave a nervous laugh. You are being dramatic. I am serious. Clara squeezed my arm. Just promise me you will not go near him. I promised her. Of course I would stay away. I was not a fool. But fate had a different idea. About an hour later, I went outside to get away from all the noise. The gardens were peaceful, lit by tiny fairy lights that made everything feel unreal. I walked down a stone path, letting the cool air settle my nerves. Then I heard voices. They were low and filled with anger. I stopped moving. Just ahead, behind some tall bushes, I saw 3 men standing over someone on the ground. One of them was holding a gun. You thought you could steal from us? The man with the gun pushed it against the other man's head. Moretti does not forget. And then he appeared. Dante Moretti. He walked like a panther, smooth and deadly. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. Take him to the East Warehouse, he said. Teach him what happens when you betray me. The man on his knees started to cry. I took a step back, but my shoe caught on a rock. I stumbled, and a small gasp escaped my lips. All of them turned to look at me. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dante's eyes locked with mine, and my world stopped. There was no kindness in his stare. There was no mercy, just cold assessment. Go, he told his men, his eyes still on me. They dragged the crying man away, and just like that, I was alone in the garden with a man who looked at me like I was a problem he had to solve. I am so sorry, I stammered, backing away. I did not see a thing, I promise. He came toward me. His steps were slow and sure. They made running seem useless. You are Sophia's cousin. It was not a question. I nodded, my mouth completely dry. Elena, Hearing him say my name sent a cold wave through my body. "You should go back to the party," he said. His voice was quiet. "Forget everything you saw here." "I will," I whispered. "I promise you." I turned to go, my legs weak and shaky. "Elena." I stopped but did not turn. "If you ever tell anyone about this, I will know." His voice was like silk wrapped around a knife. I ran. I got back to the reception, my heart beating so fast I thought it would break through my ribs. Clara found me right away. "What is wrong?" "You look like you saw a ghost." "Nothing," I lied, putting on a smile. "I just needed some air." She looked doubtful. But before she could ask more, a slow song started to play. Couples moved toward the dance floor. I needed to go home and forget this happened. But the crowd moved apart, and he was standing there. Dante Moretti was right in front of me. He held out his hand. "Dance with me." It was not a request. I felt Clara's hand tighten on my arm, but everyone in the room was staring at us. Saying no would make a scene. It would draw attention. After what I had seen, attention was the last thing I wanted. So I put my trembling hand in his. His skin was warm. His grip was strong but not rough. He led me onto the dance floor. When his other hand rested on my waist, I completely forgot how to breathe. "You are afraid of me," he murmured, his voice so low only I could hear. "Should I be?" I asked. His mouth curved up, but it was not a real smile. "Yes." We danced without talking for a moment. I was so aware of how close he was. He smelled of expensive cologne and something else. Something like smoke and whiskey and danger. "Why did you ask me to dance?" I whispered. "Because everyone is watching," he answered. "If I ignore the girl who saw me, they will think she is important. If I dance with her, they will think she is nothing." The words were a strange comfort, but they also stung. "I will not tell anyone," I said again. "I know." His hand on my waist tightened just a little. "Because you are smart, Elena. Smarter than that pretty pink dress makes you look." A reckless feeling rose up inside me. It could have been the champagne. It could have been the fear that was still in my blood. Or it was the way he looked at me, like I was both fragile and a threat. The song ended, but he did not let me go. "Thank you for the dance," I said, trying to step away. His eyes grew darker. "Be careful, little one. This world is not a kind place for innocent things." Before I could process it, before I could stop, I stood on my toes and kissed him. It was fast, barely a touch of my lips to his. It was a wild impulse that came from nowhere. I pulled back right away, my face hot with shame and shock. His face showed nothing but surprise. Then he leaned close, his lips next to my ear. He whispered in a voice that was both a promise and a threat. "You have no idea what you just started, little one." Then he walked away. He left me alone on the dance floor, shaking with fear, a completely different person than I was before. I did not sleep that night. Every time my eyes closed, I saw him. That cold gaze, the gun, the man on his knees, the way he said my name, making it sound like a warning, and the kiss. What was I thinking? I pressed my hands to my face, groaning in the dark of my small apartment. I had kissed a mafia boss, a man who erased people, a man who told me to be careful, and I had responded by throwing myself at him like a fool. The memory of his lips, warm and firm, made my stomach turn over. "You have no idea what you just started, little one." His words played over and over in my head. I could not tell if they were a promise of safety or a warning of what was to come. Monday morning felt like an attack. I forced myself to go to work at the little art gallery downtown. I hoped the familiar tasks would make me forget. I craved normal. I needed to feel safe, but normal was gone. I was in the back room when my boss, Margaret, called me. "Elena, someone is here for you." I was confused. "For me? Are you sure?" She nodded. She looked just as confused. "He asked for you by name. Very well dressed." My heart stopped beating. I walked to the front of the gallery. My legs felt like they would give out. And there he was. Dante Moretti was standing in the middle of the room. He looked completely out of place next to the paintings of flowers and landscapes. He wore a dark gray suit that probably cost more than my apartment. His hands were in his pockets. When our eyes met, I saw something change in his expression. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth. "I would like to buy some art." Margaret was almost shaking with excitement. Customers like him were rare. "Of course," she said. "Elena can help you. She has excellent taste." Then she went to her office, leaving the two of us alone. I walked toward him, my heart racing. "What are you doing here?" "I am here to buy art," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes held me in place. "Why?" "We need to talk." He looked around the small gallery. "I would prefer somewhere more private, but this is fine." "I have not told a single person," I whispered. "I kept my promise to you." "I know." He stepped closer. I smelled that scent again. Cologne and danger. "That is not why I am here." "Then why are you here?" His jaw was tight. "You should not have kissed me, Elena." My face grew hot. "I know. I am so sorry. I do not know why I did it." "It was seen," he said quietly, cutting me off. "People saw you, and now they think you are important to me." The words felt like a slap. "But I am not. You said it yourself. I am nothing. That is why you danced with me." I saw a dark look in his eyes. I lied, and before I could understand, he leaned in, his voice low. "There are people who will use you to get to me. Do you understand that?" A cold fear spread through my chest. "What am I supposed to do?" "You stay near me." His tone was absolute. "You stay close until they believe you mean nothing to me." "But will that not just make things worse?" I asked. "If they see me with you again, the damage is already done, Piccolola." The way he said the name felt like a caress, and my heart skipped a beat. "The second you kissed me in front of all those people, you stepped into my world." I could feel the room getting smaller. "I did not ask for any of this." "I know." His face softened almost imperceptibly. "But that does not change what is real. So what do we do now?" He took out his phone, typed for a moment, and showed me the screen. A number was glowing there. "Save it. If anyone you do not know comes near you, you call me right away." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my own phone to save his number. "I do not get it," I whispered. "Why does it matter to you if I get hurt?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and his fingers gently moved a strand of hair from my face. The touch was so tender it took my breath away. "Because innocent people should not be broken," he said softly. "Especially not because of me." The bell on the gallery door rang before I could think of a reply. An older couple came inside and Dante instantly pulled back. His entire demeanor turned cold and businesslike. "I will buy that one," he said, gesturing randomly toward a landscape painting. "That will be $4,000, I said, my voice unsteady. He produced a credit card without a second thought. "Fine." After he was gone, I just stood there in the silent gallery. I stared at the card he had placed in the bag with the painting. Dante Moretti, Private Investments. It had no other details, only a name and his number. I knew I should tear it up, delete his number, and pretend none of this happened. But I put the card in my pocket instead. Later that night, I was locking the gallery doors when I saw it. A black, expensive car was parked on the other side of the street, its engine idling. My stomach turned to ice. With trembling fingers, I found my phone and dialed the number Dante gave me. He picked up before the first ring finished. "What is it?" "There is a car," I whispered. "It is parked across the street from the gallery. It has been there for the last 10 minutes. Go back inside and lock the door. I am 5 minutes from you. Do not go outside." The call ended. My hands shook so much I could barely get the key in the lock. Once inside, I secured the deadbolt and moved away from the glass front. The car outside did not move. 4 minutes later, a second car appeared, It was sleek and black, driving with an undeniable purpose. Dante got out. Even from across the street, I could feel the tension radiating from him. He walked directly to the waiting car, the window lowered. I could not hear their words, but I saw the rigid control in Dante's stance. It was violence held on a tight leash. Then he turned and came toward the gallery. I unlocked the door, my hands still shaking. "Who was that?" I asked him as he came inside. "Someone you no longer need to think about." His eyes moved over me, searching for any sign of harm. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but it was a lie. I was not okay. I was terrified. "Come on," he said, his voice softening. "I am taking you home. I have my own car. Someone will get it for you tomorrow." His tone made it clear this was not a discussion. "You are not driving by yourself tonight." His car was just as luxurious as I expected. All soft leather and a silent, powerful engine. He did not speak as he drove. I gave him the directions to my apartment building in a voice that was barely there. When we arrived, he parked and turned toward me. "You are safe now," he said. "I have made sure of it." "For how long?" I whispered. His jaw tightened. "For as long as it needs to be." I should have just left. I should have thanked him and run for the safety of my apartment. Instead, I had to ask, "Why are you doing all this for me?" He just looked at me for a long time, his dark eyes impossible to read. "Because you kissed me, Piccolola," he finally said, "and in my world, that is a promise." He then reached over and pushed my car door open, a clear signal for me to leave. I got out on weak legs and walked toward my building, refusing to look back. But I could feel him watching me until the front door closed behind me. 3 full days went by with no word from Dante. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I was checking my phone all the time. I jumped whenever the gallery bell rang and looked for black cars on every street. Clara called me twice to ask about the wedding. I lied to her both times, telling her everything was normal. Nothing strange had happened. I told her I danced with Dante Moretti, but that it was only one dance. She did not need to know anything else. On Thursday night, I was closing the gallery when my phone lit up. An unknown number. Dinner at 8 o'clock. An address was included. My heart started pounding. I knew who it was from. Me. Why? The answer was immediate. Dante. Because people need to see us together. And because I want to. That last part made me forget how to breathe. Me. Is this mandatory? Dante. Yes. Wear something nice. I stood in my closet feeling completely lost. My clothes were either for work or for relaxing at home. I owned nothing suitable for a dinner with Dante Moretti. I chose a simple black dress I had bought for a gallery event the year before. It was conservative, with a hem just above my knees, long sleeves, and a high neck. It felt safe. At 7:45, someone knocked on my door. It was not Dante. It was a polite, professional driver who took me to the same black car I had seen before. The restaurant was the kind you only see in movies. Low lighting, tables set far from each other for privacy, and waiters who moved in total silence. The hostess brought me to a secluded corner table where he was waiting. Dante stood up as I got there. The simple act of courtesy made my stomach flip. He wore a dark blue suit without a tie, and the top button of his shirt was open. He looked incredible. Elena. He pulled my chair out for me, and I sat down, feeling like a child playing dress-up in an adult's life. "This restaurant is beautiful," I said, looking anywhere but directly at him. "I had a feeling you would like it." He took his seat, and a waiter appeared instantly with a bottle of wine. A heavy silence fell after the server walked away. I ran my finger along the stem of my glass, trying to think of something to say. "You said people needed to see us," I began. "Who is watching us?" "Someone is always watching." His voice was completely serious. "That is just how this world is. And what are they supposed to believe when they see us?" His eyes locked with mine, and the intensity of his gaze sent warmth rushing to my face. "They are supposed to believe that you belong to me now," he said. that to hurt you would be a very bad idea. By being here, by sitting with me in that dress, by looking at me like you want to run. A small smile appeared on his lips. Believe me, Piccolola, they are getting the message. I took a drink of wine to hide my embarrassment. I still do not understand why you are doing all this. You do you not? The question was quiet, almost a threat. I did. At least I was beginning to. But I wanted him to say it. You do not even know me, I whispered. I know what matters. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying my face. I know you work in that gallery for just enough to pay your bills. I know you ride the bus when your car breaks down. I know you have a degree in art history that you cannot use because there are no jobs. My eyes went wide. You had someone look into my life. Of course. His tone was unapologetic. I had to know who I was dealing with. And what did your investigation show? That you have no place in my world. His expression softened a little. It showed that you are good. That word seemed to hang in the air between us. I am not that good, I said, thinking of that reckless kiss that caused all this trouble. If you were, you never would have kissed me, he said, a touch of humor in his voice. That was the most honest thing a person has done to me in years. Honest? I almost laughed out loud. It was a stupid thing to do. Perhaps. He sipped his wine. But it was genuine. And in a room where everyone was hiding behind a mask, that was important. Our food was served, and we ate in a tense, quiet atmosphere. I was aware of his every movement. Every time he looked at me, my skin felt hot. Tell me something real, he said without warning. I blinked at him. What? Tell me something true about yourself, not just a fact that I already know. I thought for a moment, then spoke softly. I am scared. Of all this. Of not knowing the rules. Of making another mistake that will drag me deeper into a life I cannot handle. He was silent for a while. Then he reached across the table, and his fingers lightly brushed against mine. You have a right to be scared, he said gently. But you do not have to be scared of me. Not ever. The touch was quick, but it sent a shock through my whole body. Your turn, I whispered. Tell me something real. His jaw became tight. I have not been able to get you out of my head since the wedding. I could not breathe. Dante. I tried to. His voice was low and almost rough. I tried to tell myself that you were just a complication, another problem that needed to be handled. But then I saw you in that gallery. You looked at me like I was some kind of monster, and all I wanted was to show you I could be something different. What else could you possibly be? The question was softer than I had meant for it to be. I do not know. He pulled his hand back, and I instantly felt the loss of its warmth. That is the entire problem. This time he drove me home himself. The car seemed smaller, more intimate with just the two of us inside. Dark. Thank you, I told him as the car stopped in front of my apartment building. For the meal, for everything. He kept his hands on the steering wheel, his knuckles tight. Do not thank me yet. This is not over. When will it be over? I asked. It will be over when I am certain you are safe. He turned and looked at me. The power in his eyes took my breath away. Or it will be over when you tell me to leave you alone. And if I do not tell you that? The question came out before I could think. A dangerous light appeared in his eyes. Then we will both discover what happens next. I should have said goodnight. I should have left the car and walked away from this man who had already thrown my world into chaos. Instead, I heard my own voice ask, "Do you want to come inside?" His face changed, showing surprise, then desire, then control. Elena, he said my name like a warning. You do not understand what you are asking. Maybe not, I admitted, but I am asking. He stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then he slowly shook his head. Not tonight, Piccolola. A wave of both disappointment and relief washed over me. Why not? Because when I enter your apartment, he said softly, it will not be because you are frightened and confused and need something to hold on to. It will be because you know precisely what you want, and you are ready to take it. My cheeks grew hot. That is not true. Yes, it is. He reached over, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. And there is no shame in it. But I will not use it to my advantage. What if I want you to? The words were a quiet whisper. His eyes became darker, and I saw his control slip for just a moment. Do not say things like that unless you truly mean them, he said, his voice rough. I do mean them, I breathed. He leaned in closer, and my heart beat so hard. I was sure he could hear it. His lips just barely touched my ear, and a chill ran down my back. Then prove it, he whispered. Choose me again when you are not afraid. Choose me when your mind is clear, and when you understand that getting closer to me is a step into darkness. He pulled away. I sat there, shaking, my body filled with confusion and desire. Good night, Elena. I got out of the car, my legs weak, and walked toward my building. This time, I did look back. He was still there, watching me, making sure I was safely inside. And I understood with sudden clarity that I was no longer running from Dante Moretti. I was falling toward him. The flowers came to the gallery the next morning. They were not roses, which would have been too obvious. They were white peonies, elegant and simple in a crystal vase. The card inside just said, D. Margaret nearly fainted. A secret admirer. Something like that, I said, touching a soft petal. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Dante. Do you like them? I typed back. They are beautiful. You did not have to do that. He replied, lunch today. I paused, my finger hovering over the screen. His words from the night before played in my head. Choose me again when you are not afraid. Was I afraid? Yes. But I also felt pulled toward him, a force as strong as gravity. I wrote, Where? His answer came instantly. I will pick you up at noon. He was there exactly on time. Today he was dressed more casually, in dark jeans, a black shirt, and a leather jacket. He looked both dangerous and handsome, and every woman in the gallery followed him with her eyes. Ready? He asked, ignoring them all. I grabbed my coat and followed him to a different car. It was still an expensive car, but it was less noticeable. A dark blue sedan instead of the black town car. Where are we going? I asked as he drove into traffic. To a place where we can speak without being heard. That sentence should have made me nervous. Instead, I felt a knot of excitement in my stomach. We drove out of the city and into the hills, where the houses grew larger and were separated by many acres of land. He finally turned onto a long driveway lined with olive trees. At the end stood a beautiful modern house with windows from the floor to the ceiling. It was all clean lines and quiet style. Is this yours? I asked him. It is one of my properties. I come here when I have to think. He led me inside. The interior was not what I had expected. There was no dark leather or heavy furniture. Instead, there was light. So much light coming through the huge windows. The simple furniture was white and gray, with the warm color of the wood floors and the art on the walls. It is beautiful, I said. And I meant it. I am glad you think so. He walked to the open kitchen. Are you hungry? You can cook? A small smile touched his lips. Do not be so surprised. I am very capable. I watched, amazed, as he took ingredients out of the refrigerator. Fresh pasta, tomatoes, basil, and garlic. He moved with a confident, practiced skill. Where did you learn to cook? I asked from a bar stool. My grandmother. A softness came into his eyes. She always said every man should know how to feed himself a proper meal. Tell me about her. He stopped, his knife held over a tomato. Why? Because I want to know you. The real you. Not just the man that everyone fears. He was silent for a long moment. Then he started chopping again. She raised me after my parents died. She taught me everything important. Loyalty, respect, and the difference between having power and being cruel. Did she know about your... I stopped, unsure of the right words. My work? He nodded. She knew. She did not approve of everything, but she understood. In our world, you do not get to choose the life you inherit. Do you ever wish you could? His eyes met mine, and I saw something raw in them. Every single day. The confession stayed in the air between us. We ate on a terrace that looked out over the valley. The pasta was simple and perfect. Talking with him was easier than I had imagined. We talked about art, about books, about the small things that make up a life. He asked about my family, and I told him about my parents, who were both gone now, and about growing up poor and dreaming of art galleries in New York. He asked me why I did not go to New York. I just shrugged. Money, timing, and fear were all the usual reasons a dream remains just a dream. What if I could make it real for you? I looked at him suddenly. What did you say? I know people, he said. Galleries, collectors. I could make the introductions you need. No. The word was sharper than I meant it to be. I do not want that. His expression clouded over. Why not? Because whatever I achieve, I need to know it was my own work, not because of who I am with. I hesitated. Who you are with? His voice was quiet and dangerous. I admitted that I did not even know what we were. He put his fork down and gave me his complete attention. What do you want us to be? The question took my breath away. I am not sure I have a choice in the matter. You always have a choice, Elena. Do I really? I held his gaze. You told me I was already involved because I kissed you. You said I needed your protection. That does not sound like a choice. You are correct. He stood and walked to the edge of the terrace, turning his back to me. You are a part of this world now, if you want to be or not. But what you do next is your decision. I went to stand beside him at the railing, looking out at the valley below. What are my choices? I can protect you from a distance, he said. I will make sure no one can harm you, but we will live separate lives. You will return to your world, and I will stay in mine. His jaw was tense. Or, you can let me into your life. You can accept that what is happening between us is real, and we can discover what it means together. And if I pick the second option? He turned to me then, and the look in his eyes made me feel weak. Then you must accept all of me. Not just the man who cooks pasta for you, but the man who commands an empire built on terror and violence. The man whose decisions will give you sleepless nights. The man who will use violence to protect you if he must. You are trying to scare me, I whispered. I am trying to be honest with you. He reached out and his fingers touched my cheek. Because once you are mine, Piccolola, I will never let you go. Those words should have scared me, but instead, they started a fire inside my chest. I am not running, I said softly. You should be. Maybe. I moved closer to him, pulled by the invisible line that connected us. But I am not. His control broke. I saw it in the way his hand tightened in my hair, in the way he suddenly held his breath. Elena. My name was both a warning and a request. Kiss me, I whispered. If I start, I will not want to stop. Then do not stop. For a second we stood perfectly still. Then his mouth was on mine, and the world disappeared. This was not like the fast, impulsive kiss at the wedding. This was slow and deliberate, and it destroyed me. His lips moved on mine with a control that made me shake. One of his hands held my face, while the other pulled my body closer. I leaned into him, my hands grabbing his shirt, and a small sound came from my throat. He pulled away at once, breathing heavily. We need to slow down. I do not want to slow down, I breathed. Elena. He rested his forehead on mine. You are killing me. Good, I whispered, surprised by my own confidence. He laughed, a rough and beautiful sound. Then he kissed me again, but this time it was softer, as if he were memorizing my mouth. When we finally moved apart, I was shaking. Stay here tonight, he said in a low voice. My heart started pounding. Dante, in the guest room, he added quickly, I just do not want you to go yet. The vulnerability in his voice was clear. His admission felt like something cracked open inside my chest. I whispered, okay. He led me to a bedroom just as stunning as the house itself. It was decorated in whites and soft grays, with a window overlooking the valley. He gave me one of his shirts to sleep in and told me he was right down the hall. But I could not find sleep. I just lay there in that strange bed while my thoughts raced. I replayed every kiss, every single touch, and every word. At around midnight, I finally gave up. I crept downstairs in his shirt, my feet bare, searching for a glass of water. I found him standing on the terrace with whiskey in hand, gazing into the dark valley. He asked without even turning, You cannot sleep either? Too many thoughts. I went to the railing beside him. You too. We just stood there for a moment in a comfortable silence. Do you have any regrets? I finally asked him. He turned to look at me, and I could see the fire in his eyes, even in the faint light. No, he said, his voice rough. My only regret is that I cannot do it again right this second. Why not? Because you are standing in front of me wearing my shirt, looking at me like that. I am barely holding myself together as it is. A wave of heat washed over me at his words. Maybe I do not want you to be in control, I whispered. His gaze intensified. Do not start a fire you are not prepared to put out, Piccolola. I moved a step closer, feeling my heart pound in my chest. What if I am prepared? You are not. But his voice sounded strained. How can you be so sure? Because you are trembling. He was right. I was shaking, but it was not from fear. I breathed his name, Dante. Go back to your room, Elena. His voice was thick with restraint. Before I forget that I am trying to be a gentleman. I wanted to fight him on it, to push him, to tell him to stop treating me like I was made of glass. But I saw the rigid tension in his frame, the way his knuckles were white from gripping the railing. So I returned to the room, my body alive with an ache of desire. But something between us had changed tonight. There was no going back. I woke up to bright sunlight pouring through the massive windows and the rich aroma of coffee. For a second, I had no idea where I was. Then all the memories came rushing back. The house, the kiss, Dante's strained voice telling me to leave before he lost his control. My cheeks burned. I saw that my clothes from the night before had been placed on a chair, freshly cleaned and pressed. The quiet efficiency of it all made me smile. Of course, Dante Moretti would have people who worked unseen in the middle of the night. When I went downstairs, he was in the kitchen. 2 cups of coffee were already on the counter. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a plain white shirt. His hair was a mess, and he looked nothing like the polished man in expensive suits. I just stopped and stared from the doorway. Good morning, he said, passing me a cup. Morning. I accepted it, letting the warmth from the mug seep into my cold hands. Thank you for all of this. I will take you back to the city in a little while. I have some meetings later today. His expression shifted for a moment. But there was something I needed to ask you first. Okay. He stayed silent for a moment, as if he was picking his words with great care. There is an event tomorrow evening, a charity gala. I have to be there, and I would like you to be my guest. My stomach did a little flip. As your date? As someone I am protecting who needs to be seen with me, he said, then paused. But yes, as my date. Will that not just make everything more complicated? It is already complicated. He stepped toward me, and I could smell his cologne. It was softer this morning, more personal. You were right about what you said last night. We have to define what this is, and we cannot do that by hiding. I have nothing I could wear to a gala, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I will handle it. Just let me do this for you, Elena. His tone was gentle, but left no room for argument. Please. I knew I should have said no. that I should have held on to my independence. But the simple truth was that I wanted to go with him. I wanted everyone to see me on his arm. I wanted to step deeper into his world. "Okay," I whispered. A flicker of warmth appeared in his eyes. "Okay." The dress showed up at my apartment the next afternoon. It was delivered by a courier. It was a deep emerald green that seemed to shimmer with every movement. It was elegant and classy without being too revealing. It fit me like a glove, which should have been a surprise, but it was not. Of course, he knew my exact size. Clara called me right as I was putting it on. "Okay, what in the world is going on?" she asked. "I saw you with Dante Moretti at Lucas last night." Clara reminded me that a single meal at that restaurant cost more than my weekly salary. I told her it was only dinner, which was not exactly untrue. It was dinner with a crime boss. She asked if I was listening to myself. I started to deny it, then stopped. He was exactly what she said. Lying to my closest friend was beginning to feel awful. I told her I could not explain it yet, but I was fine. I gave her my word. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She pushed, asking if I was certain. She wanted to know if he was threatening me. "He is not," I cut in with force. "I promise you. It is a complicated situation, but this is my decision." She went silent for a very long time. "You are developing feelings for him." It was a statement, not a question. "I do not know," I whispered. But that was another lie. The event took place at a grand historic hotel downtown, filled with marble pillars and crystal lights. I felt like I had entered another era. Dante guided me inside, his hand placed firmly on the small of my back. Everyone in the ballroom watched our entrance. I whispered that they were all staring. "Let them," he replied calmly. "You are beautiful." His compliment warmed me, though my stomach was tight with nerves. These were not average people. I saw well-known faces from the news, including politicians and executives, the type of people with enough influence to shape the city. And I was certain that among them were others like Dante, men who ran empires from the shadows. He introduced me to one person after another. I smiled, shook hands, and struggled to recall their names. They were mostly civil, their curiosity masked by professional smiles. But I could see the assessments in their gazes, the unspoken questions. Who am I? What was my purpose here? What was my connection to Dante Moretti? I wished I had those answers myself. About 2 hours later, Dante was pulled into a tense conversation with a group of older men in expensive suits. Their voices were low and their posture was rigid. "Stay right here," he whispered to me. "I will be back in a minute." As he walked away, I was left all by myself near the bar, feeling completely exposed. "So, you are the one." I turned around and saw a woman watching me. She was beautiful and perfectly dressed, but her eyes were cold. "I am sorry?" I asked, the girl who finally got Dante's attention. She smiled, but the smile was empty. "My name is Isabella, an old friend." The way she said the word friend told me she meant something much different. "Elena," I replied quietly. "I know." She moved in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Let me offer you a piece of advice, Elena. Men like Dante do not have relationships. They have possessions, and as soon as they get bored, they throw them away." Her words were like a slap, even though I tried to hide it. "I do not think that is any of your concern," I said, managing to keep my voice even. "Maybe it is not." She took a small sip of her champagne. "But do not ever say I did not warn you. This world will eat a girl like you alive." She turned and walked away, leaving me feeling unsteady. Do not pay any attention to her. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Dante was suddenly at my side, his face a dark mask. "How much of that did you hear?" I asked. "Enough." His jaw was clenched. "Isabella is just bitter because I was the one who ended things with her 2 years ago. She does not get to speak for me." "Is it the truth?" I whispered. "That you just collect things and then throw them away?" He turned to me, his eyes burning with intensity. "You are not a possession, Elena, and I have no plans to throw you away." "Then what am I to you?" "I am still trying to figure that out." He reached for my hand and laced his fingers through mine. "But you are not nothing. You are not temporary. And you are definitely not like anyone who came before you." His words settled something deep inside my chest. "Dance with me," he said softly. He led me out onto the dance floor, and this time, when he pulled me against him, I did not pull back. I let myself melt into his embrace, resting my head on his chest. I could feel the steady rhythm of his heart against my ear. "I am sorry," he murmured. "For her, for everything. This is not your fault, is it not?" His arms held me tighter. "I pulled you into my world knowing how hard it would be, knowing how people would look at you." "I made my own choice," I said softly. "I am still choosing it." He pulled away just enough to look down at me, and the raw vulnerability on his face stole my breath. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough. "Why choose all of this? Why choose me?" "Because for the first time in a very long time, you make me feel like I am doing more than just surviving." The truth came out before I could stop it. "Because with you, I feel completely awake, completely alive, even when I am terrified." His hand rose to cup my cheek, his thumb gently stroking my skin. "You tear me apart, Piccolola. Every single wall I have ever built, you just walk straight through them. Is that a bad thing?" "I do not know yet." He lowered his head until his forehead rested against mine. "But I do know that I never want it to stop." The music swelled up around us. We swayed in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by a sea of people, but we were in our own little world. "Take me home," I whispered. "You are my home." He drew in a sharp breath. "Elena." "I am not afraid anymore," I interrupted him. "Or maybe I am. But it does not matter. I am tired of waiting, Dante. I am tired of being careful." His eyes grew dark, a war waging between desire and restraint. "Are you sure?" I have never been more certain of anything in my life. For a second, we just stood there, frozen in time. Then he took his hand was firm around mine as he guided me from the dance floor. His voice was rough. "Let's go." I followed him out into the darkness. My heart pounded with desire and the frightening certainty that I was stepping over a line and there would be no going back. The drive to his house in the hills felt endless. Dante drove without a word, his jaw set. One hand held the wheel while the other rested near the gearshift, close enough for me to touch. The air between us was electric with tension. I folded my hands in my lap, sure he could hear my hammering pulse. "You can change your mind," he said quietly, his eyes on the road. "Any time. I will take you home. No questions asked." "I am not going to change my mind." His grip on the wheel tightened. "Elena, I want this." I interrupted him, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want you." The words settled in the space between us. He pulled into his driveway and killed the engine, but did not move to get out. He turned toward me, his face serious. "If we do this," he said softly, "everything is different." "I know. I will not be able to let you go. Do you understand?" The power in his voice sent a chill through me. "Yes. Now come inside." The house was dark and still. He led me through the entrance, past a living room with huge windows that looked out on the night-covered valley. My heels clicked against the hardwood floors, the sound echoing in the quiet. He stopped at the bottom of the staircase and faced me. "Last chance," he whispered. I did not answer with words. Instead, I reached up and pulled him into a kiss. His restraint broke. He hauled me against his body, his mouth taking mine with a hunger that left me breathless. My breath hitched, and he pulled me deeper into the kiss. One of his hands buried itself in my hair as the other settled on my lower back, pressing me against him. I gave in completely, my fingers clenching his shirt as he lifted me with no effort at all. My legs locked around his waist by instinct while he moved us up the stairs. The kiss never broke. He pushed a door open with his foot, and we were suddenly inside his bedroom. It was a space of dark wood and sharp lines, with a huge bed taking up most of the room. He set me down on my feet. We just stood there, breathing heavily and looking at each other. "I have pictured this," he said, his voice rough. His hands came up to frame my face. "Since the first moment you kissed me at that wedding, I have imagined you right here, in my room, in my bed. Then why do we still have our clothes on?" The question surprised me, and I saw a fire ignite in his eyes. "Because I intend to do this properly." His thumbs gently stroked my cheekbones with a touch that felt like worship. "I want to savor this time with you. I want to learn every sound you make, every single spot that makes you tremble." I silenced him with another kiss, feeling him smile into it. "You are impatient, Piccolola." "I am terrified you will change your mind," I confessed, out of breath. "Never." He turned me around slowly, and I felt his fingers find the zipper on my dress. "I am going to make certain you understand exactly who you belong to." The zipper glided down, and the cool air touched my spine. His lips traced the same path of newly bare skin, making me shiver. "So responsive," he whispered near my shoulder. "So perfect." The dress fell around my ankles, leaving me in just my underwear. I had never felt so exposed. He turned me to face him again, and the expression in his eyes weakened my knees. It was a mixture of hunger, tenderness, and ownership. "You are beautiful," he stated simply. Before I could form a reply, he lifted me again and placed me on the bed. He stood over me for a second, just watching. I had to fight the urge to cover myself. "Do not hide from me," he said in a low voice. "Never hide from me." Then he was on the bed with me. His weight, his warmth, and his very presence were overwhelming. His mouth found mine again, but it was softer this time, more deliberate. His hands began to explore my body, moving over my arms, my waist, and my hips. He was mapping me with careful precision. "Tell me if I do anything you do not like," he murmured against my lips. I could only nod, already lost in the feeling of his touch. Time began to blur. His shirt came off, then his pants. The sensation of his skin on mine made me gasp. He moved to my neck, my collarbone, the hollow of my throat, taking his time and driving me slowly mad. "Dante." I breathed his name, not even sure what I was asking for. "I know, Piccolola. I know." His hand slid down my body, and I arched against his touch as a soft sound escaped me. "That is it," he murmured. "Let me hear you." My world narrowed to pure sensation. His mouth, his hands, the solid weight of him. I was shaking, completely overcome, caught between desire and a deep uncertainty. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, pulling back just enough to see my face. "Yes," I whispered. I have never." Understanding appeared in his eyes. "Elena, are you?" I nodded, heat rushing to my face. He was silent for a long moment. His expression shifted from surprise to tenderness, and then to something much darker. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked gently. "Because I did not want you to stop." "I should stop." But his hand remained on my waist, his thumb drawing tiny circles that made me tremble. "Please do not," I whispered. "This should be special. Planned. Not—" "It is special." I reached up to touch his face. "Because it is you." His control was visibly strained. I could see it in the way his eyes darkened, and in the tension that tightened his entire body. "I will be slow," he promised, his voice rough. "If it hurts, if you want me to stop, you tell me right away, okay?" He kissed me again, much deeper this time, and I let myself get lost in it. His hands were everywhere, gentle but firm. When he finally shifted to join our bodies, I gasped at the sharp, sudden feeling. He went completely still. "Elena." "Do not stop," I managed to say. Please do not stop. He began to move slowly, carefully, his gaze locked on mine. The initial discomfort melted away, replaced by a feeling of fullness and connection. The intimacy was so total that tears came to my eyes. You are crying, he said, and I could see the concern on his face. I am okay, I whispered. I am much more than okay. He kissed the tears from my face and began to move with more certainty. I clung to him, overwhelmed by feeling, by emotion, by the incredible intensity of being this close to someone. Look at me, he commanded softly. I did. The look in his eyes was a storm of possession, tenderness, and raw hunger that broke me. Mine, he breathed. You are mine, Elena. And in that second, I knew he was right. Later, we were a tangle of limbs. My head rested on his chest, and his arms were wrapped around me. His steady heartbeat was an anchor beneath my ear. Are you all right? He asked quietly, his hand stroking my hair. Yes. Are you sure? I did not hurt you. Only a little at the beginning. I stopped, feeling my cheeks grow warm. Then what? A trace of humor was in his voice. Then it was perfect. His arms held me tighter. You are remarkable. Do you know that? Why? Because you just gave me something so incredibly precious. And now you are lying here asking if I am okay. I leaned my head back to see his face. Are you okay? His expression was layered. He looked satisfied and possessive, but there was also something much softer there. I have never been better. I snuggled closer into his warmth, feeling safe and utterly content. What happens now? I asked in a small voice. Now you get some sleep. Tomorrow, we will figure everything else out. Promise me you will still be here when I wake up, Elena. He tilted my chin up toward him. I am not going anywhere. And neither are you. Not ever again. It should have sounded like a threat, like control. Instead, it felt like a promise. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me, secure in his arms. For the first time, I felt that maybe choosing Dante Moretti was not the most dangerous choice I could have made. It felt like the rightest one. I woke up to sunlight and the familiar smell of coffee, but this time when I stretched, my body had a pleasant ache that was a reminder of the night before. Dante stood by the window in just his sleep pants, looking out over the valley. He turned when he heard me move, and a genuine warm smile spread across his face. Good morning, he said. Morning. I sat up, holding the sheet to my chest. You are up early. I could not sleep. He walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. I was too busy watching you. That is not creepy at all, I teased, and he chuckled. Maybe just a little. He reached over and tucked a piece of my hair behind my ear. How are you feeling? Happy, I confessed. A little sore, but very happy. His expression grew soft. I am glad. What about you? Terrified, he answered with complete honesty. I blinked at him. Why? Because now that I have you, the idea of anything happening to you. He shook his head. It is unbearable. I reached for his hand and held it. Nothing is going to happen to me. You do not know that. Then you will protect me, just like you promised. He lifted my hand to his mouth and kissed my knuckles. With my life, Piccolola. With my life. Looking into his eyes, I knew he meant it. But neither of us realized that the true danger had only just begun. The following week was a dizzying mix of stolen time and careful joy. I worked at the gallery, and Dante took care of his business. But he came for me every evening, and we would eat dinner together. Sometimes we went to restaurants, other times we stayed at his house. We talked about everything and nothing as we learned each other. Rhythms, creating a life that felt real. Clara stopped asking so many questions, but I saw the worry in her eyes. At the gallery, Margaret was just happy that I seemed more confident. I was living two separate lives. One was normal, where I sold paintings and paid my rent. The other was a secret world where I fell asleep with a man who ruled a violent empire. A collision was coming. It finally happened on a Thursday night. I was locking up the gallery when my phone lit up with a message from Dante. "Do not leave the gallery. Marco is coming for you." A cold feeling spread through my stomach. I messaged him back. "Dante, what is wrong?" He answered, "Just get inside. Lock everything. I will explain once you are safe." My hands were shaking as I locked the main door. I shut down all the lights except for the faint glow from the security panel. 15 minutes passed before a black SUV appeared. A man I knew as one of Dante's guards, Marco, got out. He was tall and always serious. I unlocked the door and let him inside, my heart pounding. "Miss Elena," he said with a nod. "We have to leave now." "What is happening?" "There was an incident. Dante needs you in a secure location." He walked me to the vehicle and I got in, feeling completely numb. Another guard was behind the wheel, and we drove away from the gallery at a high speed. "Where are you taking me?" I asked. "We are going to Dante's office downtown. He is waiting for you there." The drive took 20 minutes, taking us through parts of the city I had never seen before. We entered an underground parking structure below a modern skyscraper, and Marco led me to a private elevator. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a room that radiated power. It was filled with dark wood, leather furniture, and huge windows that overlooked the city lights. Dante was there, standing near the glass with his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, pure relief washed over his face. "I will have to call you back," he said into the phone, then he crossed the room in 3 long steps. "Are you okay?" "I am fine. What is going on?" His jaw grew tight. "There was an attack. One of my shipments was ambushed. 3 of my men are dead." A wave of horror crashed over me. Oh my God. It was the Rossi family. They are trying to force a war. His hand came up to cup my cheek. "And they have made it known that anyone I care about is now a target." "So I am bait," I whispered. "No." The word was sharp and fierce. "You are protected. That is why you are here. Nobody can get to you in this building." "For how long?" "Until this is over." I stepped away from him, really studying his face. Something in his eyes was different tonight. It was colder, more dangerous. "What are you going to do?" I asked softly. "What I need to do. I have to send a message." His voice was completely empty of emotion. "A message that shows everyone what happens when they threaten what is mine." That possessiveness should have scared me. Instead, a strange feeling of safety washed over me. "Will it be dangerous?" I asked. "Yes." "Will you be safe?" A little of the hardness in his face softened. "Is that what you are worried about?" "Me?" "Of course I am worried about you." He pulled me into a tight embrace, his arms a shield around me. "I have been doing this for a very long time, Piccolina. I know how to handle these situations. That does not mean I cannot worry." He placed a gentle kiss on the top of my head. "Stay here tonight. I have a room prepared with anything you might need. I will return before sunrise. I want to wait for you. Elena, please." I looked straight into his eyes. "I will not be able to sleep anyway." He looked at my face for a long time. Then he gave a slow nod. "All right, but you do not leave this office. Stay away from the windows. Marco will be right outside the door." "Okay." He kissed me then, hard and desperate, as if he were trying to commit the feeling of me to memory. "I will come back," he promised against my mouth. "You better." Then he was gone, and I was alone in the silent office. I tried to keep myself busy by looking at the books on his shelves and the art on his walls. Everything was expensive and tasteful, but it revealed nothing personal about him, except for a single photograph on his desk. I picked it up. It was a picture of a younger Dante, probably in his early 20s, standing with an older woman who had kind eyes and a gentle smile. It had to be his grandmother, the one who taught him how to cook. He looked different in the photo. He seemed softer, more open, before the burdens of his world had settled onto him. The hours dragged on. I tried to rest on the leather sofa, but it was impossible. Every little noise made me flinch. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, around 3 in the morning, the door opened. Dante entered, and my relief only lasted for 2 seconds before I saw the blood. Oh my God! I shot to my feet. Are you hurt? It is not my blood, he said, his voice flat. He was already walking to the private bathroom. I went after him. He turned on the water and started to wash his hands. I watched as the sink ran red. I told you who I am, Elena. His voice was cold and far away. This is my life. This is what I do. I know. He glanced at me, his eyes sharp. Do you? Because seeing this on my hands is not the same as just knowing about it. I am not leaving, I said, my voice quiet. You should be. He dried his hands with a rough motion. You should run as far from me as you can. Is that what you want? What I want is not important. It is important to me. I stepped closer, even as a voice inside me screamed to listen to him and get away. Tell me what you did. I delivered the message that was required. His face was like stone. The Rossi family now understands what happens when they target what is mine. Did someone die? Yes. That single word filled the space between us. I should have been disgusted. I should have seen a monster. But my only thought was that he did this to keep me safe, to protect the life we were building. Are you safe now? I asked. For now. Then come here. He just stared at me as if I were speaking another language. Elena, there is blood under my nails. Come here, I said again, more firmly. He walked toward me slowly, as if he expected me to shrink back. But I did not. I wrapped my arms around his waist and held on. For a second he was completely still. Then his body sagged into mine, his arms crushing me against him as he buried his face in my hair. You should despise me, he said, his voice rough. I do not. You should be terrified of me. I am not. I pulled back just enough to see his face. I am terrified for you. There is a difference. His eyes searched mine. How can you look at me this way when you know what I have done? Because I also know the reason you did it. I reached up and touched his cheek. You are not a monster, Dante. You are a man who is trying to protect the people he loves. That does not make it right. Maybe not, but it makes it human. He kissed me, and it was desperate and raw. I could taste his fear and the violence and his vulnerability all at once. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead on mine. I do not deserve you, he whispered. Too bad. You are stuck with me. A small noise that might have been a laugh escaped him. Promise me one thing, anything. If this world becomes too dark, if you feel like you cannot take it, you have to promise you will tell me, before it breaks you. I looked into his eyes and saw true fear. He was not afraid of his enemies. He was afraid of losing me. I promise, I whispered. He pulled me close one more time. We just stood there in the silent office as the first light of dawn broke over the city. I knew that choosing Dante meant choosing every part of him, the good and the bad, the gentle and the violent. I had made my decision. Now, I just had to survive it. 2 days after the attack on Dante's crew, the Rossi family responded. I was at the gallery, organizing a new collection of prints, when Margaret called me to the front of the store. Elena, you have a delivery. I walked out expecting to see flowers, a regular gift from Dante, but it was a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. There was no return address, no note. Who dropped this off? I asked Margaret. Some courier service, she said with a shrug. Do you want me to open it? No, I will take it. I carried the box to the back room, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I took out my phone and sent a message to Dante. Did you send something to me? His reply came instantly. No. What is it? I texted. A package just showed up at the gallery. His next message was an order. Do not open it. I am sending Marco. Wait for him. But I was too curious. I gently tore away the paper and found a simple white box. Inside was a picture of me from the day before, walking to my car after work. I was alone, exposed. On the back, written in red ink, were the words, "You are easier to reach than you imagine." My hands began to tremble. The bell on the gallery door rang, and I looked up to see Marco walking in, his face grim. "Miss Elena, we have to go." "They know where I work," I whispered, and showed him the photograph. They were watching me. His jaw clenched. "Come with me. Dante is waiting." We drove to the house in the hills, where I found Dante pacing back and forth like a trapped lion. As soon as he saw me, he crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. "Let me see," he said, his voice rough. I gave him the picture, and I watched his face change from worried to icy rage. "Rossi," he said, his voice flat. "This is how he operates. He threatens before he acts." "What are we going to do?" "You are going to do nothing." He placed the picture on a table. "You are staying here. I am putting guards on you 24/7. I cannot hide here forever, Dante. You will until this is done." "And how long is that going to be?" "As long as it needs to be." His voice was quiet, but firm. "I will not risk you, Elena. I cannot." I saw the fear under his anger, the real terror he felt at the thought of me being hurt. "Okay," I said softly. "I will stay." Relief flooded his face. I need to go meet with some people, to find a way to stop this before it becomes a full-scale war. Will you be okay here?" "Yes." His kiss was hard, possessive. "Marco will be just outside the door. Do not leave this house." "I will not. I promise." Then he was gone. I was left alone with my thoughts and the two guards posted at the entrances. The hours crawled by. I tried to read and watch television, anything to distract me from the photograph and its meaning. They had been watching me, following my every move. They could have taken me at any time. The idea made my skin crawl. The sun began to set, and my phone rang. The number was blocked. I knew I should ignore it, but an impulse made me answer. "Hello, Elena." The man's voice was smooth and unfamiliar. "We have not had a formal introduction. My name is Luca Rossi." My blood ran cold. "How did you get my number?" "I have my sources, just as your Dante does." He laughed softly. "Did you enjoy my little gift?" "What is it you want?" "I want you to pass a message to your man. Tell him that if he refuses to back down, I will destroy everything he values, and I will begin with you." "He will kill you for this," I said, surprised at how certain I sounded. "Perhaps, but not until after I have hurt you. And trust me, my dear, I will make certain he has to watch." The call ended. I just sat there shaking, the phone still in my hand. I needed to call Dante. I had to tell him about the threat, but I already knew his reaction. It would be violent. It would make this war much worse before I could even think. I heard shouting from outside, followed by the sound of gunshots. I dropped to the floor on instinct, my heart pounding in my chest. More shots, loud and close. Somewhere in the house, glass shattered. Marco rushed into the room. "Miss Elena, we have to go right now." "What is happening? They are here. We need to get you away from the house." He pulled me up and guided me toward the rear of the house. Another burst of gunfire erupted, and I heard men yelling as violence exploded all around us. We reached the garage where a second guard had a car running. "Get inside," Marco ordered. I jumped into the back, and we sped out of the garage just as more shots rang out. "Are they coming after us?" I asked, breathing hard. Marco glanced in the mirror. "Not yet, but they will be." He was already on his phone. "We have been compromised. I have Miss Elena with me. We are going to the safe house." I could not hear what Dante said, but I could easily imagine his rage. The safe house was a plain apartment in a part of town I did not know. Marco hurried me inside and swept through every room before taking his position by the door. How did they know where we were? I asked, my voice trembling. Somebody talked, he said. Or they were tracking your phone. He gave me a serious look. Dante is coming. He will be here in 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes felt like an eternity. When the door finally opened, Dante entered like a storm of restrained violence. His eyes met mine, a battle of relief and fury in his gaze. Are you hurt? He asked. No, I am fine. He walked over to me, his hands on my face as he checked for himself. What happened? Tell me everything. I recounted the phone call, Rossi's threats, and the assault on the house. His expression grew colder with every word I spoke. He called you himself, Dante stated. He made his threat directly to you. Yes. And you did not call me right away. I was about to, but then… You could have been killed, Elena. His voice grew louder. Do you realize that? If Marco had not gotten you out of there… But he did, I cut in. I am safe this time. He stepped back, pushing his hands through his hair. This is my worst fear come to life. You are in danger because of who I am. This is not your fault. Yes, it is. He faced me again, and the anguish in his eyes was heartbreaking. Anything that happens to you is because of me. Every threat, every second of fear, it is all because you chose me. And I would choose you again, I said, my voice firm. You do not mean that. Yes, I do. I stepped toward him. I am terrified, Dante. I will not lie about that. But I am not going to leave you. You should. Too bad, I said. I am not going anywhere. He watched me for a long moment as a complicated emotion crossed his face. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could hardly breathe. I cannot lose you, he said, his voice rough. I cannot. You will not. Promise me you will not. I promise. He kissed me then, a desperate, claiming kiss, and I returned it with all my strength. When we finally broke apart, his face had hardened into a dangerous mask. This is ending tonight, he said softly. What are you going to do? What I should have done in the first place. He looked at Marco. Get everyone on the phone. A full meeting in 1 hour. Dante, I began to say. I am finishing this war, he said, cutting me off. Permanently, one way or another. He left me in the safe house with 3 guards, promising to be back by dawn. I tried to sleep, but it was impossible. Every noise made me flinch. Every passing minute was torture. At around 4 in the morning, my phone rang. Dante. It is done, he said without any greeting. What is done? Rossi is dead. His top men have accepted my terms for peace. The war is over. I felt a wave of both relief and horror. Are you all right? I am alive, he said. That is all that matters. Come back to me, I whispered. I am on my way. He arrived 20 minutes later. I could see the profound exhaustion on his face, the burden of his actions. But I also saw his relief that I was unharmed. It is finished, he said softly, gathering me into his arms. You are safe now. I held on to him as we stood in the silent apartment while the sun began to rise. The war might have been finished, but I knew that this was only the start of my journey to understand what it meant to love a man like Dante Moretti. After Rossi's death, Dante's world changed. The news traveled fast through the city's criminal networks. If you crossed Dante Moretti or threatened what was his, you would pay for it with your life. The terms of peace he forced were harsh, but they worked. Nobody would dare to challenge him again for a long time. But this new peace had its price. I officially moved into his house in the hills. I stopped pretending that I had another life. The gallery granted me a leave of absence, understanding my need for space without asking questions. Clara's calls became less frequent. I knew that the choices I was making were costing me her friendship. My former life was dissolving like a half-remembered dream. And Dante had changed. He was even more protective, more possessive. He was always touching me, as if he needed constant proof that I was real and safe. At night, he held me so close that I would sometimes wake up struggling for breath. Talk to me, I said one evening on the terrace as we watched the sun go down. Tell me what is on your mind. He remained silent for a while. I killed a man because he made a threat against you. I know. It does not bother you? Should it? I turned to face him. You were protecting me. You were protecting us. I am not going to condemn you for that. Even if it turns me into a monster. You are not a monster. I reached for his hand. You are a man who has been forced to make terrible decisions in a terrible world. That is a kind way to see it. It is the truth. He drew me closer, and I rested against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I have been thinking, he said quietly, about what is next for us. What do you mean? This life is a dangerous one. It will never be safe, and you will always be a target as long as you are with me. His arms tightened around me. I have to know that you understand that you truly accept it. I do. Do you? He pulled back so he could see my face. Because this is not just for now, Elena. This is not some phase we will move past. This is who I am. This is what I am. I know that. And you still choose this life? You still choose me? I looked into his eyes and saw his vulnerability, his real fear that I would finally see the truth of my situation and run away. Every day, I whispered, I choose you. Every single day. The hardness in his features seemed to melt away. I do not deserve you. You probably do not, I answered with a smile. But you are with me now. He kissed me slowly, deeply, and I let myself get lost in the moment. 2 weeks later, our world shifted once more. I was in the kitchen preparing coffee when I heard loud voices coming from Dante's office. They sounded angry. I moved closer, not trying to spy, but I could not stop myself. You cannot be serious. That was Marco's voice. I am absolutely serious, Dante responded, sounding weary. It is the only option. You would surrender everything you have built for her. There was a pause. Then Dante spoke softly. Yes. My heart froze. The families will never approve, another man said, one of Dante's men. They will interpret it as a sign of weakness. I do not care how they interpret it, Dante said firmly. I am finished. I am walking away. You are leaving? Marco's voice was filled with disbelief. You cannot just leave this kind of life. Just watch me. I stepped back from the door, my thoughts racing. He was giving it all up, abandoning his entire organization. For me, I brought it up with him that night. I heard your conversation today, I said softly. Your talk with Marco. He became completely still. What exactly did you hear? I heard enough to know you are about to give it all away. I walked toward him. Why? Because I want a future with you, he answered, his voice firm. A genuine life. Not one where you live in constant fear. Not one where I am always checking over my shoulder. Dante, you cannot do this because of me. It is not just for you. It is for the two of us. He held my hands. I have lived my whole life in this world. For what purpose? For power? For money? None of it matters if I lose you. Tears formed in my eyes. What will happen to everything you have created? I will give it to Marco. He is competent and loyal. The transfer of power will be smooth, and you will just leave. We will vanish. We can begin again in a new place. We can create something that belongs only to us. The idea was alluring, almost irresistible, to have a normal life with Dante, far from all the violence and risk. But I understood the price. It would cost him his entire life's work, and all the people who depended on him. I cannot allow you to do that, I told him quietly. His expression changed. What? I cannot let you sacrifice who you are for my sake. It is too great a cost. Elena, do you think I am blind? I see how you come alive when you are conducting business, making choices, and keeping your people safe. I gently touched his cheek. That is a fundamental part of you. I fell in love with all of you, not only the pieces that would fit into a normal life. You should have a normal life, he said with a rough voice. Perhaps, but I chose an extraordinary one. I smiled as tears ran down my face. I chose you. I chose all of you, even the dangerous parts. You have no idea what you are saying. Oh, yes, I do. I held him close. I will not let you sacrifice your world for me. We will find a way to make our lives work, together. Elena, promise me, he started. No, I interrupted him. Promise me that you will not give it all up. Promise me we will find a different way. He looked at me for a long time, the struggle obvious in his eyes. Then he pulled me close, holding me as if I were the only thing keeping him grounded. I promise, he whispered into my hair. We will find a different way. The following morning, I woke up and Dante was already dressed, sitting on the bed and watching me. I have a gift for you, he said in a low voice. He opened his palm to show a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat. Dante. It is not a proposal, he said quickly. Not right now. Not before I can offer you the life you are meant to have. He opened the box to show a beautiful ring, a plain band with one diamond. I want you to wear this as a promise. A promise for what? A promise that I belong to you completely. He looked directly into my eyes. That whatever happens, no matter how bad things get, I will always find my way back to you. Tears streamed down my face as he placed the ring on my finger. I love you, he said softly. I do not believe I have said that out loud before, but it is true. I love you, Elena. I love you too, I managed to whisper. He kissed me with a gentle reverence, and I felt the significance of his vow settle over my heart. Later that afternoon, I called Clara. I told her we needed to meet in person. We met at our usual coffee shop, and the space between us felt enormous, much larger than the few weeks we had been apart. You seem different, she observed cautiously. I am different. Are you content? I considered her question. I truly considered it. I thought about the risk, the dread, the violence, but also the love, the security, and the feeling of being truly understood by someone. Yes, I answered truthfully. I am content. She looked at my face for a long moment before she nodded. In that case, I am content for you, even if I do not grasp it. Thank you. But Elena, she said as she reached out and took my hand, promise me that you will stay safe. Promise me you will not lose who you are. I promise. It was a vow I fully planned to honor. But as I returned to the car where Marco was waiting, the ring feeling heavy on my finger, I wondered if it was a promise I could really keep. Loving Dante required me to enter his world, and I was starting to realize that his world did not release its hold easily. 3 months later, I was standing in Dante's downtown office, gazing at the city lights. I felt like a completely different woman from the girl who had accidentally witnessed a mob hit at a wedding. That girl was innocent and naive, terrified of the shadows. This woman had learned how to exist within them. You are overthinking again. I turned around and saw Dante leaning on the doorframe, watching me with that piercing look that still made my heart race. Just thinking, I replied. He walked into the room and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. About what? About how much things have changed. Any regrets? No. I relaxed into his embrace. Surprisingly, none at all. It was the truth. The gallery had found a replacement for me, and I had begun to work from home as a consultant. My hours were more flexible, giving me more time to adapt to Dante's life. Clara and I still spoke sometimes. Our friendship was not the same, but it survived. My entire life had reformed around this new existence. And Dante? He had honored his promise. He had discovered methods to minimize the risk, making strategic investments that were gradually moving his organization toward legitimate businesses. It would require years, perhaps even a lifetime, but he was making the effort. For me, and for us. "There is something I have to tell you," he said in a low voice. A knot of tension formed in my back. "What is it?" "I met with federal agents today." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "They have been putting a case together, not against me, but against some of my old associates." He turned me around to look at him. "They want my testimony. If you do it, you will be completely free. They are offering full immunity, even witness protection if we choose. A fresh start." His gaze searched my face. We could vanish, begin again, and be normal. It was the exact life he wanted to give me months before. The very thing I told him not to sacrifice. "But?" I asked, sensing the hesitation in his tone. "But it requires me to betray men who have been faithful to me, men who put their trust in me." His jaw clenched. "It means I would become the one thing I have always hated, an informant." I knew the gravity of his words. In his world, loyalty was the ultimate virtue. Betrayal was the deepest sin. "What do you want to do?" I asked him softly. "I do not know." He stepped away, combing his fingers through his hair. "A part of me wants to accept the offer, to give you the life you should have. But another part of me cannot abandon who I am." I completed his thought. "Yes." I walked over to him and took his hands. "Then do not do it. I am serious. Do not accept the deal if it means you will destroy yourself." I looked up at him. "We will find another way. We always do. What if there is no other way? Then we will live with the risk. We will continue to build our life, piece by piece, until it is strong enough to support us." He looked at me as if I were something precious, fragile, and impossibly brave. "You would actually stay?" he asked with a raw voice, "even knowing this life will not change?" "I told you months ago that I choose you. That decision is still the same." He kissed me then, a kiss filled with desperation and thanks. I could taste his relief, his fear, and his love all at once. "I do not deserve you," he breathed against my lips. "You really have to stop saying that." He let out a laugh, a sound of pure happiness, and pulled me in tighter. 2 weeks after that night, Dante turned down the government's deal. The agents were not pleased. But without his help, they had no power over him. They eventually moved on to different cases, and we could finally relax a little. But that peace came at a price. "There are whispers," Marco said one night at a meeting I was not meant to hear. "Some of the younger families believe you are going soft. They think the girl has weakened you." "Let them believe what they want," Dante replied, his voice steady. "They could try to challenge you. Then I will give them a reminder of why they fear me." I stepped back from the doorway with a knot in my stomach. Even when things were quiet, the threat of violence was always there. The challenge arrived a month later. One of his shipments was taken. It was a small loss, not very important, but it was a clear signal that someone was questioning Dante's power. I saw him get ready for the meeting with the other family. His face became that cold, unreadable mask I remembered from the wedding. "Be careful," I urged him softly. "I always am." His kiss was gentle, even with all the violence coiled inside him. "I will be back before midnight. I promise. Promise." He was gone. I attempted to lose myself in work, in television, in anything to stop my mind from picturing what was happening. At 11:30, he came home, unharmed but looking drained. "How did it turn out?" I asked him. "It is handled. They will not test me again." I did not press for details. I had learned there were times to turn away from the shadows. He wrapped me in his arms, and we just stood together in the silent house, holding on. "I love you," he murmured. "I need you to understand that, regardless of what comes next or what I am forced to do. I love you." "I know," I said, looking up at him. "And I love you, every part of you, even the monster." "You are not a monster," I told him firmly. "You are just a man protecting what belongs to him." He kissed me and led me toward our bedroom. He let his body show me everything his words could not. Later, as we were tangled in the sheets, he spoke quietly. "Marry me." I blinked and turned to face him. "What?" "Not right away. Not until things are truly calm. But someday." His fingers drew light circles on my skin. "Marry me, Elena. Make us permanent." Tears started to form in my eyes. "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain about anything in my life." "Yes," I whispered. "Someday. Yes." He held me closer, and I drifted to sleep listening to his heartbeat, the ring he had given me shining in the moonlight. 6 months later, our existence had found a rhythm that felt almost normal. I took a job teaching art history part-time at a local college. Dante had moved more of his operations into legitimate businesses. We hosted dinner parties with Marco and some of Dante's less dangerous associates. We talked about what was next, perhaps a proper wedding, perhaps having kids one day. But the darkness never completely disappeared. I could see it in how Dante was always scanning his surroundings. I saw it in how Marco and the guards were never truly at ease. They never relaxed, and in the rare, quiet phone calls that made Dante's face turn to stone. This was the life we had, both beautiful and perilous, loving and brutal, ordinary and completely extraordinary. "Do you ever miss the life you had before?" Dante asked one night while we watched the sun go down from our terrace. "Sometimes," I confessed. "I miss how simple it was, how safe. Would you return to it if you had the chance?" I considered it. I truly thought about the woman I was before that wedding. She was smaller, more protected, and less alive. "No," I said, with total honesty. "I would not alter a single thing." He drew me near and kissed my temple. "Even after everything it cost you? Especially because of what it cost me." I looked at him. "Because it led me to you." Epilogue. 1 year after the wedding that altered my world, I stood before a mirror wearing a different kind of dress. This one was white, elegant, and simple. Clara was next to me, fixing my veil. We had slowly pieced our friendship back together, finding a new foundation for it. "You look stunning," she said softly. "I am so scared," I confessed, "scared of marrying him, and scared of how much I need this." She smiled. "That is how you can be sure it is real." I knew Dante was waiting downstairs. We were having a small, private service with just our inner circle to make permanent what had been destined since our first kiss. I ran my thumb over the ring on my finger, the promise he made months ago, which would soon have a wedding band beside it. "Are you ready?" Clara asked. I took a deep breath. I thought of all the things that brought me to this moment. The risk, the fear, the violence, but also the love, the security, and the feeling of being seen for who I truly was. "Yes," I answered. "I am ready." And I went downstairs to marry the man who had changed my entire life. The one who showed me that love did not need to be safe to be genuine. He taught me that sometimes the most amazing things are born from darkness, and that my decision to stay, even when it was difficult, even when it was unsafe, was the most courageous choice I had ever made.